Rachel Abassi. I'm a grateful recovering alcoholic and stroke survivor. And today we're going to try to make up for yesterday's episode about nothing. Today I wanted to talk about the difference between self-care and selfishness. And this topic is very related to sobriety and what it was like when I was drinking and being very self-centered, but not knowing I was being self-centered, always being focused on what I need in the moment. Um, so there's a delicate balance, I think, between self-care and selfishness and being able to communicate your intentions with those around you, particularly for those of us that are in stroke recovery and vestibular recovery. And, in sobriety as well, that's where this whole concept started for me. Being able to prioritize my needs without making others feel like they're being neglected. And I think that there are some practical tips that we can talk about here to find that healthy balance. So I just listened to this philosophical YouTube video about the difference between self-care and selfishness. And I was like, that makes a lot of sense. I wanted to be inspired just a little bit because I wanted to talk about like what is self-care. And when I listened to this philosophical view on what is self-care, it was one of those videos where the guy starts out with, well, in order to define what self-care is, we need to define what self is. It's kind of like, I don't know. There's a president who said, and now I can't remember which president it was, but he responded to a question. I think it was Clinton, but he responded with to a question and said, well, it depends on what your definition of is. And that's what it always reminds me of. These philosophical views that always start with what is the definition of a word. But I really appreciated what this guy said. I should actually reference it for you, but I don't have it in front of me now. Oops. So I feel like I need to have that in front of me. Wait, let's see if I can find it again. Yeah, here it is. Dr. Jordan B. Peterson is what his name is called. Dr. Jordan B. Peterson. So I feel it's important to reference that. Okay, I'm going to stop moving my computer around so I don't vomit. Okay. So what he said was self is defined as and I won't define it as eloquently as he did, but self is defined as the past, present, and future self all in one. So, as opposed to what do I want right now in this moment? Self is actually, you know how I always talk about Rachel version 1.0, 2.0, 3.0? Well, self is all three of these. That's the best way that I can describe how he was defining self. So he was saying that when I'm taking care of all those versions of me, then that is self-care. If I am playing on a whim and reacting to something that I want right here and right now, that is more swings towards selfishness. So whether that's exactly what he said, that's what I heard. And so that's going to be my definition here. So Self-care for me then is looking at, and that's what my psychiatrist does, right? When we go to a talk therapy, they go back to our childhood and talk about what our relationship with our parents was and our friends and what are the events of our whole life that have led up to who I am today. So talk therapy is focused on self-care in the concept of your whole self from the beginning of your life to where you are now. Um, and when I look at self-care from that perspective, it really does help me to understand what am I doing in this moment that is selfish and what am I doing that is self-care. It doesn't mean that, like, as someone with a vestibular disorder, as someone who is disabled, I have chronic pain that gets triggered by what is happening right here and in the moment. So there is still that attention that I need to give. I need to be very self-aware um, in the moment as well. So that's why I was sharing about this morning that I feel like it gets kind of complicated when you're in recovery, when you are focusing on, everybody is paying attention or should be paying attention to their mental health and their physical health. But when we enter into recovery, when we suffer from chronic pain, it is exponentially more challenging to understand what do I need to do now to help myself? What do I need to do today to help myself to focus on recovery? And how can I set my goals accordingly? Um, how can I ensure that I'm not damaging relationships when my focus from day to day is very different than it used to be. Back when I was drinking, I always felt like I was very selfless. I always felt like, if there was one cookie left, I'm going to split the cookie between my kids and I wouldn't have any. That is just a simple example, but that was how I led the household. I always made sure that everybody got everything and I put myself last. And that was not the right way to do it because I think that I subconsciously was setting myself up for failure when I'm looking at myself as, well, I never do anything for myself. I'm the almighty mother and I always give, 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 and I never do anything for myself. And I remember entering into my first marriage feeling that way. I've shared that on the podcast before, that I was like, I'm going to be the best wife there ever was, and I'm going to be the best mother there ever was, and I'm going to do everything. Well, when I claim that I'm going to do everything for everyone else, I'm setting myself up for failure because I need self-care. And I was not factoring that into the equation early on in my marriage and becoming a mother. Um, so as I got older and my drinking got more and more out of hand, it was almost a response. Drinking, now I drank because I'm an alcoholic, but there are certain things that trigger drinking. In the end of my active alcoholism, everything was triggering drinking. But I recall somewhere in there that, well, I never do anything for myself. I get this at least. I get drinking at least. I remember one incident, and I don't know if I shared this before or not. I feel like I did. But one time I was sitting down to watch American Idol, and it was the one show I watched throughout the week. It was the one show that I let myself watch. And at the time, I remember thinking, this is all I ask for. And then I remember the kids and my husband at the time, the kid's dad, coming up and like talking to me or yelling or complaining or something. I can't even remember what they were coming to me for, but I exploded. I had my wine in my hand and I turned to them and I was like, I don't even know what I said, but I reacted and I exploded. And I was telling them that this is all I get. Give me this at least. And that was not fair. That wasn't fair to them that I had set up this scenario that that I give, and so this is the one thing I get, so I need to get it perfectly. It's just not fair. It's never giving them an opportunity to nourish their relationship with me, like to give to me. I was never giving them the opportunity to feel good about giving because I was just stepping in and trying to control everything. I mean, I'm aware of that now. It's a little too late. It's a little too late. Anyway, um, and there's nothing I can do about it now, but I am aware now, and that at least helps me moving forward. So self-care is is not getting that one thing, being able to watch American Idol on that. I don't remember what day of the week it was on, Monday or something, or two. No, I had no idea. But self-care was not me giving myself American Idol one day a week. That was not self-care. Self-care would have been me making time for myself to engage in things that I enjoy more often, spending more time for myself and not setting myself up so I felt like all I was ever doing was giving. Um, Getting enough sleep, that's self-care. Just sitting sometimes and saying no when when we are aware that our tank is running out. That is also self-care. But I feel like it gets really complicated, for me at least today, where if I get invited to something, I really have to think, is this good for me or not? And it's not, it's physical is what I'm thinking first. I'm thinking, is this physically going to trigger my symptoms, and how long is it going to take for me to recover? That is not selfish, it's self-care. But I think one of the struggles that I feel like I face sometimes is that I'm concerned somebody else is going to think that I am being selfish, that I'm only being focused on my own needs without considering others. And that's not what I'm doing, even though maybe it seems like it to some people. I don't want to damage any relationships. Um, but one clue that helps me to be certain that I'm not being selfish is that I don't have feelings of guilt when I am prioritizing my physical well-being. Uh, what it makes me think of is when somebody asks, so before I had my stroke, before all of this, when I was out there working in a career and interacting with friends and being able to do really whatever I wanted to do. Being able to say yes or no to anything, not having to worry about is this going to trigger my pain and how long is it going to take me to recover? Is it worth it? That kind of thing. Before that, I remember being asked to do things, and sometimes I didn't want to do it. You know, is that self care or is that selfish? And I know saying no feels selfish sometimes when you feel like, oh, I'm going to upset them by saying no, that I won't tell them that I don't want to go. I'll make an excuse. And I think that is still an area where it gets kind of complicated, making time for other people, making time for other people, doing activities that nourish your mind, body, and spirit. But also recognizing boundaries and learning to say no if it's going to drain you in some way. You know what I mean? Like, is it mentally draining? That is just as important as something causing physical pain. It's just as important. And that's the invisible illness side of things. It's just as important to communicate effectively our boundaries mentally as they are physically. And it, it honestly, I think it feels like it's hurtful to say, I can't do this. It's going to be too much for me, like mentally or something like that. That seems like it would come across as offensive, yet physically, I can say, I can't do that because it's going to be too physically draining for me. So I realize that it's a sensitive topic, but I guess I just wanted to express how important it is to consider communicating your needs to your loved ones, both mentally, physically, and spiritually. And if and honestly, it's a opportunity an opportunity to strengthen your relationship by communicating that certain things are maybe overwhelming for you, and being able to like negotiate your time and space for self-care and helping other people understand a little bit more about what's going on between your ears, not just how you're feeling. It's like we're expected, if we feel okay, we're expected to show up. And sometimes things are, especially, I'm thinking specifically in early sobriety, sometimes things are difficult to be present at when we're experiencing something in our private lives that is mentally stressful or spiritually stressful. So, um, tips for finding balance between self-care and making sure that maybe you're not coming across as being selfish. I mean, I'm not an expert, but I can share with you my experience. Um, and the first thing that I have found to be of top importance in my recovery is to prioritize or incorporate regular self care in my daily and weekly schedule. If I have a routine that I stick to, which is, for example, going to my 7 a.m. sobriety meeting, going to my 8 a.m. sobriety meeting, recording my podcast, making sure I eat lunch, walking my dogs. I, that those of you who listen for a long time know that I'm always coming up with another idea, another something to add to my routine. And lately I've been thinking because of my extreme back pain that I need to start incorporating a longer walk. And this longer walk is going to challenge me in all ways, my vestibular self, my back. But I think it's going to be important for my self care. Like mentally, I'm going to love it. And hopefully, it'll strengthen my back. And hopefully, it will also test my vestibular system as well. So, I'm always trying to incorporate new things into my new activities into my routine, new self-care practices into my daily and weekly routine. And if something doesn't work out, fine. But if, for example, somebody wants to have a phone call every day at 7 a.m., I'm going to communicate to them that that's not going to work for me. That is a schedule conflict for me because it's not I could physically do it, but mentally I have to take care of my sobriety. And so that comes first. Another thing that I did yesterday is I reached out to my psychiatrist because I noticed that my psychiatrist appointment tomorrow overlaps with my stroke support group that meets once a month. So I reached out to my psychiatrist and I said, is there any way that I can move our meeting because I really would like to go to the stroke support group and it only meets once a month. So of course she's like, yeah, she encourages that. So it's all about being able to communicate um, your motives, your intentions. Why are you doing something? So another tip is really to pay a close attention to to your action, like why you want to do something. Um, is it because it's on a whim you want to do it? Or is it something that is actually going to feed your physical and emotional needs? I'm trying to think of a good example of that. If somebody, I have a scheduled dinner for tomorrow night, and if I get to like noon tomorrow and I'm really having a difficult time visually and cognitively focusing, I may have to cancel that dinner because we're planning on going out to a restaurant near my house. And I need to in recovery, I need to pay close attention to my physical and emotional needs at all times. Yesterday, I was feeling really poopy and it lasted all day. I started to figure out later in the day what might have been causing that. But I had no idea most of the day. And that's why I just kind of babbled yesterday on the episode because I was like, I have no idea what my point is. I just needed to talk, and sometimes days are like that. But I did figure out later what it was, like right before bed. And I think tomorrow being around somebody, going to dinner with somebody, that is going to feed my emotional needs. Is it going to negatively trigger me physically? And is it worth it? Like, I have to pay close attention to that. And it's hard. It's really difficult sometimes. Yesterday, I went to my vestibular support group meeting and I cried because I was talking about my niece getting married and that I wasn't able to go because of my vestibular disorder. So I was able to watch it on Zoom. And I said, but I'm feeling sorry for myself because now it's going to take days for me to recover from watching that on Zoom. And it causes me to feel sorry for myself. And so I got a bit choked up during that share. Um, but they assured me that it's okay sometimes to just have a bad day as long as you don't stay in that and you take action and respond accordingly. So, as difficult as it is, and I think it's like, gosh, it's such a big learning curve to go from having a full-time career and doing whatever I want, whenever I want, to having to be so freaking self-aware all the time and paying attention to my physical and emotional needs. And when those contradict each other, that's when it's super difficult. But when they do, that's when I need to seek support, like talk to a therapist, talk to a friend, talk to a support group. That's what I did yesterday. Talk to a support group. And tomorrow, if I need to cancel, I need to trust that that relationship is strong enough to understand, you know? I have to have a lot of faith in my relationships. And in order to do that, I try to give when I have enough to give. Um, that was a little bit about the philosophical video I listened to today talked a little bit about when we're giving to our whole selves, if I'm giving to Rachel version 1, 2, and 3, I'm giving to my whole self. It shouldn't be any different than giving to somebody else's whole self. It's just another human being. And that made sense to me. So I think there is a balance that we can find between self-care and selfishness. It's just, it's challenging. It's challenging. I think that we have to look at our motives. I think we have to look at our habits and we have to make conscious efforts to prioritize our needs above our desires. Feeding my whole self and not just the self that's showing up today. Because what I'm thinking of today that I need may very much be counter uh, counteract what is going to benefit my whole self. So that's where my head's at today. Thanks so much for listening, and I will talk to you tomorrow.